I think one of the things that's really important for people to realize, and this was one of the mistakes that I made in the beginning, is that so many people want to delegate before they automate.
Welcome back to the What Went Wrong podcast. I am your host, Tabatha Thorell, and with me today, I have a very special guest, Cierra Luek. And what I love about this woman is that she is multifaceted. I looked at her and I thought she was like 20 years old, but she is such a veteran entrepreneur and mother. She has helped over 350 businesses build their audience and groups on Facebook. I mean, that in of itself is amazing because we know how important community is. She's had predictable 5 to 7 figure months with smaller audience of highly qualified leads. She's been featured with speakers of Taylor Welch, Rich Schifrin, John Madsen, of the coaching. It's people I can't even pronounce, so you know they're important, right? She's a wife of she's been married for over almost 20 years, okay, to an Army veteran, which I love because I come from a military family, so I love that. And she has 5 kids, so we can totally relate. So this woman is amazing. I'm so excited for her to share her wisdom and her story with our audience today. But with those accolades, Cierra, we all know that you did not start at the mountaintop. And so we are all dying to know what went wrong and how did you bounce back from that failure to get to where you are today?
Well, first off, Tabitha, I just want to say thank you so much for bringing me on. I think the concept of your podcast is really, really cool. I can't wait to go listen to other episodes with all of the mistakes that people made. It's like, spill the tea. Like what happened? What
Yes.
happened that you haven't told people?
Yes.
So rather than the stories that I tell all the time, rather than the stories that are pretty like there's a lot of really funny things that have happened along the way.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that's really important for people to realize, and this was one of the mistakes that I made in the beginning, is that so many people want to delegate before they automate. And in my business, this has actually happened so many times. It's like, do you ever have one of those mistakes that you just keep making because you're like, well, what was the lesson I was supposed to learn? What was the
Right.
lesson I was supposed to learn? And it's like right in front of you, but you can't even see it.
Yeah.
That was the mistake that I've made probably the first 3 years of my business. And it was, I kept trying to delegate out things before they were really ready to delegate. And honestly, I don't even think I really learned the lesson until earlier this year. And so I kind of stagnated my business for 3 years straight because of that. I would, I, okay. So I started my business back in 2020, and it was about 2 weeks after my son's brain surgery that I was just like, you know what, I'm going to go all in on this, because I really want to show my son that he has something to live for. I want to show him what's possible. I want to show all of my other kids that they need to pursue their dreams firsthand. So I
Mhm.
just really went all in on my business. And when I did that and started consulting for the first time, my first month, I sold a $3,800 package, collected $1,900 up front. The next month I collected $7,700. The next month was $12,000. Then the next month was $20,000. And in my first 6 months, I did $100,000. So
Wow.
I was like, I'm rolling. It's
Yeah.
only up from here. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
what else can I do?
Yep.
And it was like everything I put on my vision board, or everything I put on, like I called it a morning formula because I came from the traffic and funnels world. But everything I put on my morning formula, I got. And I got it way faster than I thought. Like within 2 months, I had all of the things that I wanted, like material things. Like I
Mhm.
bought my new car that I dreamed that I wouldn't be able to have. It was like
Right.
ridiculous stuff. And it was just so fast. And so I went to the ladies of this group that I was in, and I was like, well, who should I hire first? Because I was so swamped in my business and I felt
Mhm.
like I was missing out on my family. And they're like, okay, well, first you need a nanny and then you need a house cleaner. And I was like, what? That has nothing to do with my business. And they're like, it has everything to do with your business. And I
Mhm.
was like, okay. So I hired a nanny. That was freaking fantastic. She would go do all the boring stuff with my kids, like, you know, do some of the games I didn't like to play, do stuff around the house I didn't like to do. She
Yep.
would do their chores with them. She would even tutor them. I actually don't like homeschooling. We homeschool our kids, but I don't enjoy it. I have zero patience for that. I'm just
Yeah.
like, I'm like, if you just sit down and do the work, you'll be done in 5 minutes. And it's like 2 hours later, they're not doing it. I'm like, why aren't you doing it? Like, just do it, just get it done. So my husband's way better at that than I am. And he
Mhm.
homeschools them now, which is amazing. Um, But so the nanny would sit down and do all of that with them so that I could go focus on my school, or not my school, on my work while they did schoolwork and stuff like that. And then I could just do the fun stuff in the evenings with them. So that part was really cool. Now, the problem is that I hired my nanny, I hired a house cleaner, I hired a VA, I hired somebody to help with accounting. I also hired somebody to help me with sales. So I hired like 5 people at once.
Yeah.
Not realizing that hiring actually doesn't take less off your plate, it puts more on your plate initially, right out the gate, especially if you don't already have the set system or SOPs or anything lined out.
Yep.
And so like my life kind of, my numbers in my business, my
Hmm.
life got overtaxed. I was overwhelmed, I was depressed, I was sad, I was like, I hate my life right now. But then when it comes to like the business side, like my business dipped really really low, because like once you get to settling into 20 to 30,000 a month, it's like you're like, this is normal. So this is what you expect every month. And then when it dips like down to like 5 or 8,000, you're like, oh crap. And it hurts and you feel it and you're like, I can't have less than 20 or 30,000. Like I have all these expenses, I have this team to pay, I have whatever else in the business. And it's like that at every level. So like as I continued to grow, this was like, you got to remember, this was my very first year.
Yep.
But like that same thing happens at every level. Like whatever the patterns of behavior or the habits that you have with how you treat your budget, how you treat finances, how you treat people, all of that, like it money doesn't make all of that suddenly go away. All those habits are exactly the same. So if you're used to living paycheck to paycheck when you have little money, when you have lots of money, you're still going to do the same thing because that's your habits. It's like ingrained inside of you. You can't just have money sitting in the bank. We have to go like invest it somewhere. We have to go
Yep.
spend it somewhere. And then, the next month comes and another big expense comes up or another big thing that you want to buy. And then the money's not there. And you're like, where did it go? So you can have like 1 million or 5 million or $1 billion sitting there and still be like constantly living paycheck to paycheck. It's habits, right? So what happens is I fizzle, and then I'm like, I can't have this happen. So I fired like, oh, I forgot, I hired another person in there. There was like a sixth person I hired in there. It was nuts. It was absolutely nuts. I hired so many people at once. And I ended up firing like 3 of them and keeping the other 3. And even though I kept the other 3, I would say that it didn't really actually reduce my workload like I thought it would. I thought it was going to reduce at least 50% of my workload, but it wasn't. It was more like 25% of my workload,
Right.
because they didn't have the capacity to do what I did, and they didn't help out as much as I thought they would. They just didn't know how, and I had to do a lot of training. So it's like you get that too. You invest a lot of training and time and attention into people, and I'm really good. So I need to preface this because I don't think a lot of people are. I don't think a lot of people are really, really good at building like vision, mission, purpose. Like they think that they are, but like it means a lot to them, but it doesn't mean very much to everybody else. And I'm really good at that. That's one of the things I help my clients to establish for their communities, their groups, for like being able to grow quickly and have it
Hmm.
spread like a wildfire. So I did that for my team. So my team was completely bought in, but most people don't have that skill. So it's like most people are trying to get people to buy in and get them to execute. And that was one of the biggest lessons that I had to learn to get past that mistake. And I know I've been kind of going on and on about the mistake. So if you want to dive into other parts of it, I want to open it up for that before I just jump off the deep end into like the lesson that I learned and like what I've been implementing recently that has absolutely blown my mind and changed everything.
Well, okay, so in this midst of like, you've hired these people and you went from like elated, excited to like, oh crap, like what's happening? Stuff isn't quite what I thought it would be. Cause I'm a big like who, not the how, because I try to do everything and then nothing seems to go forward. Cause it's kind of like trying to do, we talked about this earlier, but like one task at a time. And especially if you're a beginner entrepreneur, it's, you kind of have to do it all because like you said, you can't hire it out because then your expenses are more than what you're bringing in. So you're in this moment where you have these 6 people and you have to fire them. First of all, how did you go about doing that, and what made you choose who to fire? And then are those positions still on your plate, or did you eventually figure out the right system, the right training so that you could train somebody and just do what you're amazingly gifted at?
Well, okay, so the second half of your question, I answer with the lesson that I've learned recently
Okay.
because I still kept making the same kind of mistakes over the last few years.
Hmm.
So with firing, I didn't actually fire them. So with one of them, I kind of talked. Uh, there's a lot of books that I've read on psychology, and I
Hmm.
kind of talked to him in such a way that he quit. Like I made it to where it was like his idea, so I wouldn't have to fire him because I like the first person I fired, like I actually fired somebody. They were actually getting married, so they were at their bachelor party for the weekend, and it was a guy on my sales team, and he stepped in and he was trying to tell me how to run my business and how to change things, and he was only a week in, and we didn't really know each other that well, and
Ooh.
so he just came in with a lot of ego, and I ended up we had a conversation about it. He was telling me he was trying to like write his own terms of how I should pay him and how I should shape
Mhm.
it. And I'm like, dude, we're a week into this. Like, there's so
Right.
many other people that I interviewed for this position. Like,
Right.
no. And I got to the like end of the call. I just asked him a lot of questions, and I got to the end of the call, and I ended up with that guy. I was like, okay, well, I don't think this is going to be a good fit. I wish you well on all your endeavors. The end. Like
Right.
I didn't cherry coat it, sugar coat it, candy coat it, whatever people say. I didn't like compliment sandwich him. Somebody compliment sandwiched me. I got a position with a company that gave me the opportunity to really grow my skills in that first year of my business, where they hired me in as a contractor.
Mhm.
And while I was there, they ended up letting me go. And the way that they let me go, I had no clue from the first like 15 minutes of the call that that's what they were doing. So they
Mm.
asked me, they're like, hey, do you need any support with anything? This call is just to help you with that. Like they lied to me at the beginning of the call
Right.
to compliment sandwich me. And I'm like, everybody knows what a compliment sandwich is, and nobody likes them.
Right.
Nobody likes them. They don't feel good when you're like, hey, you look good today, but your outfit sucks, but I think that nobody's gonna be bothered by it. It's like,
Right.
what? It's like
Your face looks
backhanded
good.
compliments or something, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, because then it's not sincere. You don't feel like anything is sincere. They're just telling you that because they want to save face. And nobody really wants that. We all at some point really do want the truth. Now, the truth can come with a little, delicate fingers, but at the same time, I'm the type of person, it's like, just tell me the truth. Let's cut to the thing. I don't waste my time.
Yeah, I mean, I've come to really value being direct and um, having others be direct with me. I think that especially online, and a lot of the work that we do now is remote, so everything that I do with my business is remote. Every once in a while I go do in-person speaking engagements and stuff like that, and then I'll do these in-person VIP days with my clients, which is like so much fun. But the majority of what I do is online, it's remote, and the majority of the people that I work with, it's online and it's remote. And there's too much of this, and I think it came from like there were so now there's like the crypto world, and then there's also the affiliate marketing world, and then you have like the network marketing world, where these people beat around the bush and pretend like they're coming in for one thing, but they're actually coming in for another, and it feels like a bait and switch. And so
Mhm.
again, it just feels very disingenuine, it feels very fake. And so I've come to value, and I've also come to articulate my words in a very direct fashion whenever I'm working with anybody. And so it's like I'm like bluntness hurts sometimes,
Mhm.
but I appreciate it more because
Right.
then I'm very clear on expectations. Like you can't, oh man, there was this really good quote the other day. I so want to go grab it. That one of the people that I work with like shared with me, and it was so phenomenal in the way that it articulated how can I grab it?
Yeah,
Is
go
that
for it.
okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, go grab it for sure.
Oh, I'm like pulling my microphone away. Here we go.
No, I love
The
that. I
sound
think
is weird. There we
for
go.
so many of us, um, especially if you have like this heart for people pleasing, and then people like tell you what you want to hear, but then at the end of it, it just leaves you wondering, like, wait a second. Like you said, I didn't, was I fired or was I not? Is this a good shirt? And now I'm confused. And and then it's all this confusion. And in reality, it's like you can tell somebody truth without being an a-hole. Like, you know what I mean? It's like you can tell somebody directly without having all of this offense and this like energy to it. It's like, I want you to be better. So I'm going to tell you, like, if you have spinach in your teeth right now and we're videoing, I'm going to be like, hey, Sierra, like right here, but I don't have to be like, dude, you got something in your teeth or whatever, and so I
It's
think
like,
that's,
"Oh my god, your smile's so beautiful. You got a little spinach right here, but you look so beautiful."
I don't think people will notice. And two, I think it's who's telling you. Because if somebody's coming to you and they literally are like you, I just referring back to your sales guy, he's giving you advice or telling you what he thinks is truth. And in reality, he has no wisdom behind it. It's his opinion. And that I think is the thing that will irk me is when people come at you with their opinions, but they have no experience or wisdom behind it. But yes,
Indeed.
go ahead with your
Indeed.
quote.
And when you're not so when you're hiring and you're not even hiring a person as the expert, you're just
Mhm.
hiring them to fill a role where they're like the subordinate, like
Right.
in the
Employee.
hierarchy of skill or whatever.
Mhm.
It's
Right.
like if I was bringing someone in as a sales consultant, it's different because
Right.
then it's like, yeah, cool, teach me all the things about sales. But it's like, have you made more sales than me? No. Okay, cool. I'm going to lead here.
Right.
I'm going to take the
Exactly.
lead. I have
Exactly.
way more experience.
Right.
Here's the quote. It was phenomenal. It says, unspoken expectations are premeditated resentments.
That's so good. That is so that's so good in business, but in relationships, period. And you've
Oh,
been
yeah.
married almost 20 years. I've been married 17 years. Like, isn't that the truth? Like, if
Yeah.
you have these unmet expectations of that, yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So those unspoken expectations, whatever they are, like so if you're a leader and you're talking to your team and you have unspoken expectations, then when they don't follow through on the things that you haven't told them that you wanted, now you're upset with them and they don't even know that you want it. And I think on the flip side of that, when I come in and I'm working with a client or whatever and they don't actually tell me what they want, and so it's like it's so important as our job to identify and ask what people want. And if we don't have clarity, to ask, and if we think we have clarity, to also ask. Like
Yes.
that is
So
a really
much.
big thing because so like what do they say? Like, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So it's our job as a leader in whatever situation we're in. It's our responsibility to ask and then to just shut up and listen. I think
Mhm.
not enough people do that. Like, it's like you ask a question and we're listening to respond rather than listening to understand. And when we listen to understand, the way that we respond actually changes.
Yeah. Yeah, so many leaders and CEO, and whether you own your company and you consider yourself that, I mean, if you're a position of a leader, like you have, it's kind of like that contractor that measures twice and cuts once. It's like you have to listen twice and talk once. And
We
so
had a construction business, so it's so funny that you brought that up because my husband used to say that all the time, like measure twice, cut once. And his guys always like measured, cut, and then it was wrong, and then they cut again, and then they cut again, and then they had to go get a new piece of wood. And you're like, dude, you're like wasting materials.
right, and time
Like this
and
job is so
frustration.
much more expensive now because of you.
Yet, but how many times do people hire and do that? I mean, I even find myself like with my VA, it's like, and I always tell her when stuff doesn't happen, I'm like, it's on me. I didn't communicate what for your understanding. Even if I think I did, I obviously didn't, because her motive isn't to, she wants to keep her job. So I'm not thinking like she's purposely doing it wrong. I'm looking at my communication style and saying, what am I not articulating? Like,
I
what do I
think
need to
I
do?
think if somebody wants to know like how good they are at communication, they should just go give a job to OpenAI, ChatGPT. They should just go give a job to ChatGPT and tell it exactly what you want and
Uh-huh.
then read the output that you get. The output that
Yes.
you get is going to be garbage the first
Right.
time. Then you
Exactly.
ask another question or you
Yep.
tell it to do something else, and then it is still going to be garbage. And it takes so many iterations to
Yep.
get that down. It really is revealing of how inarticulate we actually
Yes.
are.
Yes, and how much we assume that people should
Mm,
just know, and again, this is a lesson for moms, dads, relationship, not just business, because how many times do we just assume our kids know? Like, why are they doing this? And it's like, oh, I don't know that I asked that right, or whatever the thing is. So I love that. That's so good. So tell us now, like the lessons, like you said, in the last even year that have brought you
oh
to
no,
where you are today.
it's like in the last 2 months.
2 months. Oh, yes. Good.
Yes,
It's fresh,
it
fresh
is in
slate.
the last 2 months. It is super fresh. And the only people I've shared this with are my personal private clients. So I took a position with an 8-figure company because they started last year. I'm not even going to tell you what company this
Mhm.
is because you're not going to know it, first off. And secondly, when you look it up, like their online presence, their online footprint is so small, you wouldn't know who they are. Like they have been very under the radar. It's so cool. But it's one of my friends. And last year they launched in February. And in 7 months, they were already an 8-figure company.
Wow.
And he had reached out to me around like February, March, and he's like, "Hey, if you want to come in and do some sales," and I was like, "Nah, I'm good, thanks."
Yeah.
And then towards the end of this last year, he was like, "Hey, if you want to come in," he's like, "I'd love to have you on the team." He's like, "I don't know what you do, but we'll find something for you just because I think that you could be a really valuable asset to the team."
Mhm.
And I was like, "Okay, cool." And so I jumped into the team because like growing to 8 figures in such a short period of time, I'm like, the heck did they do?
Right, you wanna
And
learn.
so and so I get in there and initially they have me in a few different roles. And so I actually end up taking over like 3 different roles. And I'm onboarding all of the new sales team in one role. I'm processing refunds in another. And then for the company, we have like 1,500 clients. And then I'm also in charge of like workflows for sequences for marketing, so like email and text sequences and building these out and everything inside of our CRM platform. And so I've taken over these 3 responsibilities. And then he comes and approaches me and he's like, "I think I'd really love you to have a team, like one of the sales teams, and be like a leader of one of the sales teams. And I think you could do great in it. Is that something you'd be interested in?" And I was like, "Sure." And I was like, "Okay." So he's like, "I want you to hand off all 3 of these other roles. Um, and I want you to train up a VA on doing this. We're going to hire them and train them up." And I was like, "Okay, cool." And then I find out a couple days later that they're actually hiring the VA that week, and they want me to train them that week, and they want me to have it handed off in a week. And it's like the company is growing so fast, so
Mhm.
exponentially fast, that we have to be, how most of these bigger companies, they always say like how slow those bigger ships turn.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
most of these bigger companies do not have the ability to adapt quickly. In this company, the way that they built, they only adapt quickly. They are tracking growth week over week. And because they are moving so fast, like at the speed of light, which is what every newer startup and entrepreneur should be doing in their business, instead of trying to operate like these larger corporations that move really slow and make decisions super slow,
Uh-huh.
we have the unique ability to move quickly and to
Mhm.
make decisions quickly. So what I learned with this, and as I was handing this off, is I had all these really cool ideas of how I was going to make each of those different roles better. And
Mhm.
I had a laundry list of all the things I wanted to do. So when I realized I had to hand it off in a week and that I was no longer going to be doing those activities anymore, I was like, "Well, can I curse on this?
Sure.
I don't know."
Sure, go for it.
Okay, I was like, "Well, shit. Like the f am I gonna do?"
Right, right,
And
right.
I'm like, and so I look at my list and I just I whittle it down to my MVAs, which is your minimum viable actions.
Mhm.
And that has become like my mantra over the last month is MVAs on literally everything. So I started applying this to like what my clients were doing. I started applying this to what I'm doing in my business. And then I like in everything that I'm doing with this other company, I started applying it there. And so with MVAs, what I'm looking for is like if they did absolutely nothing else, but only these minimum actions,
Mhm.
they would be successful. And we just remove out all of the fluff, because how many SOPs, like the standard operating procedures, how
Mhm.
many of those have so much fluff inside of them that's really not that important?
Right.
How many things in our marketing do we do and waste time on that really aren't that important?
Right.
And I've always understood the principle,
Yeah.
but I never really had to put it into practice in such a short period of time, because
Hmm.
when you have to compress the timeline, like suddenly it's like, well, I shouldn't do that. Well, I don't have time for that. Well,
Right.
I definitely am not going to make that one happen. And so you just start like chunking stuff in file 13, which is the trash.
Yeah.
You just start chunking stuff in the trash and you're like, okay, not doing that, not doing that, not doing that. And it's like, it's almost like Marie Kondoing your business,
Yeah.
where it's just like, it's not even about like, does it make you happy? It's about, does it get the result? No. Okay, cool. Gone. Okay,
Yes.
bye. And just being okay with letting it go, because at the end of the day, like when it comes to like business versus like family time, um my business is never going to win. Like, I love you business, I love all the things that I've done with it, I love my clients, I love what I do, I am very passionate about what I do, but at the end of the day, my family comes first, period.
Yep.
And if my business is not serving or supporting my family, and it is the other way around, then I'm not going to pursue that business anymore, because my family comes first.
I love that so much. And I mean, you nailed it. So many nuggets there. And a lot of people, what you said, like the minimum action, it's like the needle movers. And I think a lot of people have heard that. Like
Oh yeah.
our heads hear it, but it's real. You're not taking heart of what that truly means until you're forced to. Like you were literally forced to, I have to figure this out because, oh crap, like I have 7 days to train somebody.
Well, so we typically do it like at a 30,000 foot view.
Hmm.
So my husband and I kind of created the system based like a coagulation of of like Bob Proctor stuff and Tony Robbins stuff and John Maxwell stuff and Brian Tracy stuff that we learned from all of these really
Hmm.
great leaders and
Yep.
men of the past, of how to like organize our skills and how to set goals, and then how to like backwards plan to achieve them, and how to contingency plan and all that. He was in the military for so long, so we learned how to organize, right? And a lot of times when we're doing the needle movers, we're doing it from a 30,000 foot view.
Hmm.
So the 30,000 foot view, we're only seeing the wave tops and we're not seeing all the pieces in between. But I'm talking about like, you dive into your content
Yep.
and you look at your content plan and you're like, what are the minimum viable actions for content plan?
Yeah.
You dive into your sales calls and you're like, what are the minimum viable things that we need to do on a sales call?
Hmm.
You dive into your outreach process and how you do outreach to, and we break this apart because you wouldn't bucket your clients that you have to reach out to versus the people who are not clients yet. Those would be two
Hmm.
completely different buckets. And so then you look at that and you're like, what are the absolute minimum viable actions? And then the next question isn't how do I delegate it, it's how do I automate it and then delegate the automation.
Yes. Yeah. I
And
think.
I think again, that's like a really big mistake that most people make early on in their business, is that they just delegate things rather than automating. And there's so many things that can be automated, especially in this day and age.
Hmm.
And a lot of people were joking around that like, oh, AI is going to make so many jobs disappear and all of that. And it's like, who do you think is going to fix the AI?
Right.
Like,
Right. There
it's
always
like,
has to be a human behind the I mean, that's just truth. Do you think that people don't do the minimum actions because they're afraid of what those are, or they're not sure what those are? Like, if I stop doing all this, the whole business is going to crash, right? As opposed to, I want to take this off my plate so that I can enjoy my life, enjoy my family, enjoy those things. Like, why do you think
there's
people
two
don't?
things that they're not doing. One is they're not doing testing.
Okay.
And the second thing is they're not doing thinking time. I really love my favorite audio. I listen to it. I probably listened to it more than 100 times in the last 4 years. And I will continue to listen to it probably until the day that I can no longer listen to it. So, like the day that I die.
Mhm.
It is by Earl Nightingale. It is a really old audio, but it's available for free on YouTube. And it's called The Strangest Secret in the World. And one of the points that he makes inside of that is that men think that they think, but they're not actually thinking intentionally, because our minds always wander
Mhm.
and our minds naturally do that. But that's not us intentionally thinking.
Right.
That's not us. That's not us like asking for divine inspiration or trying to create something new or imagining something on purpose. It's just our brain running on autopilot. And
Mm-hmm.
your brain runs on autopilot all the time. I found this out with my son when he had his brain tumor. We didn't know he had a brain tumor. He started having seizures. He ended up picking up a hot pan with his bare hands and got second and third degree burns on his fingers and palms. And he ended up having to have 4 skin graft surgeries. He was in
Wow.
so much pain. And because of that, that exacerbated the seizures and made the seizures come on even more. And so he'd had this one seizure this one time and he woke up. And when he woke up from the seizure, he didn't remember anything. And the thing that was interesting is we had just celebrated my daughter's birthday. And so the house was still decorated and everything. And he was looking around and he was like, "What's that? Why is that there?" And he was really freaking out. And it was a really scary moment for me because it was like my son's brain was like a computer that got rebooted,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like my son was just erased. Like the last few days of my son were erased. And so that was really hard for me to see, but it helped me realize that our brain is not who we are.
Right.
And we think that us running on autopilot and all these thoughts and ideas that come up in our mind, that that's who we are. And while it can be commingled with who we are, that is just our brain on autopilot processing things to make sure that things get taken care of. Our brains were designed so that we could survive.
Yep.
So everything the brain does is just about survival. It's not about thriving.
Yep.
My husband says this really cool quote. I'm probably going to misquote it, so somebody correct me somewhere. Whatever platform you're listening on, correct me
Yeah.
on this. Um, the quote is that it's like when we're under a stressful situation, or when we have pressure applied to us, that we're not going to rise to the level of our capability.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to sink to the level of our training or our habits.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be that survival mode. That's going to be our brain on autopilot. And so it's like we have to be very aware of what our current habits are. This is kind of going back to the very beginning of this conversation
Yep.
when we were talking about, and I was mentioning about like if you have the habit of living paycheck to paycheck, it doesn't matter how much money you make, you're still going to be paycheck to paycheck because those are your habits.
Yep.
And so if you want to have a new scenario, you have to have new behaviors. You have to have new habits. There was a really cool quote that I heard here recently, and it's that amateurs focus on results and professionals focus on behaviors. Our behaviors are one of the most important things that we will ever take control of.
Yes.
And it's the biggest impact is on our life and our trajectory in life and where we go, and whether or not we, read the 10x is easier than 2x kind of books and
Right.
we actually apply it or not.
Right.
It's all based on our behaviors.
Yep.
So I know people who read that book and didn't do shit with it.
Right.
And then I read that book and based on my behaviors, I would read a chapter and I would sit down, I would do my thinking time, I would remember old exercises, action steps that I'd done before that I could apply in a different way. And I started applying it right away.
Yeah.
And I actually just posted yesterday, this is one of the speaking engagements that I got, but one of the principles he talked about in the book was he just hired somebody specifically to get him more speaking engagements.
Mm-hmm.
And that was her only job. And because
Yep.
it was her only focus, she was able to get better at it. She was able to do training on it. She was able to like pursue it passionately.
Yep.
And so I got my VA. She does a few other things for me that are just like small one-off projects, and she's
Mm-hmm.
been very consistent for 3 years. But I reached out to her and I was like, "Hey, could you do this?" And so she started doing it, and I already have nine different engagements on the calendar for the next month. And
Nice.
she was going to do more, but I told her, "Hey, I only want to do about 2 a week."
Okay, you're doing too good with that.
Yeah,
Hold
yeah,
back
yeah.
a
She was
little
like,
bit.
"Oh, I thought you said 3. I'm sorry." And I was like, "Yeah, no. Let's just do 2 a week. That's great because I also want to do other things in my business."
Right.
But it's one of those things where I took something that was inside of the book and I actually took action on it and I
Yeah.
applied it, and it was because I had the behavior of sitting down and doing thinking time and saying, what is the most important? I think one of my favorite thinking time processes is to say, what will my business look like 7 years from now? What will my family's lifestyle look like 7 years from now?
Right.
I think the number seven is actually really interesting because a lot of people do a 5 year or a 10 year plan. Most
Mhm.
most people do that, but
Yeah.
seven, your brain doesn't like, because when you think of 10, you're like, oh, my 18-year-old's going to be 28, my 6-year-old's
Right.
going to be 16, and you start getting in the weeds of too many things.
Right.
Whereas when you think of the number seven, you don't do as much math. Like you could sit down and work out the math, but your brain's just like, no, I don't
Right.
want to do that. Especially if it's the end of the day. Your brain's like,
Right.
no,
Yeah.
maths is hard. Um, but so you sit down and you answer that question, what is my business going to look like 7 years from now? It's far enough away that your brain will imagine something probably pretty different than what you currently have,
Right.
but it's close enough that your brain thinks that it's possible.
Yeah.
So as you sit down and you write that out, you dream, you imagine, you maybe go into details of different things and all of that. And then the next question is, how do I do that this year?
Yes.
And I think that that was from, and I could be wrong on this, it was something that Bob Proctor shared in his Lead the Field series. I think it was something that the guy who was the inventor of the peanut used to do. Like, well, not the inventor of the peanut, obviously, like peanuts were there, but like the guy who took the peanut and came up with like 50 or 100 different uses for it and then made an empire off of peanuts. Um, from all of the different uses from it. It could have been that guy or it could have been somebody else.
Because that was,
There was a contractor. There was a contractor who like worked in not sawmill, not lumber, but something to do with that. And he would do this, and he was one of the only people who survived the Great Depression. Like
mm,
his business was the only one that survived the Great Depression, and it was because he was 7 years ahead of everybody else because he was imagining, what is my business going to be like 7 years from now, and then he
right.
did that. And all of the other businesses like his shut down during the Great Depression, but not his. And I think that that's one of the things that really stands out for me is like, we're not competing against each other. We really are not competing against each other. Somebody can steal like everything that I teach. They could take everything that I teach and they could start applying it, and they could like funnel hack me all the way to the moon and back. And it wouldn't matter because I'm on a completely different trajectory than they
Right.
are. Their life experiences have brought them to a certain place in life that is taking them on a completely different path. So even if they were to take something from me, it does not matter because we're on such different paths in life.
Exactly. And I think exactly what you said, when you imagine, whether it's 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, your brain doesn't know the difference of what's happened and what's imagined. And so when you can tell your brain that you don't know if you're going to be in a recession or what the economy is going to do, but you just tell it, this is what's going to happen. And your behaviors are a stem of what you believe, and what you believe is what you're imagining to. So I am a big like visionary, like sit down, think about it, like what you think about is what you become about. And we get to train our brains. It's like this untrained animal that we have to every day tell it to sit, tell it to stay. I get to decide that. And so many people don't. They let that go astray. So I love everything that you've said. I can resonate so much with it. We could probably sit here and talk for another 2-3 hours, but I want to thank you so much, Sarah, for your time and your wisdom. I can tell that what you say is wisdom and not just an opinion. And I think that is so huge for our listeners because we're a society of opinions, but it's like, where have you had skin in the game? And that's why I do this podcast of like, what went wrong? Because when you're in the wrong, AKA failure, you're learning and growing, and you get to decide where that leads to the right. And we all are going to go through the ebbs and flows. And me and Sarah were talking beforehand. She's like, I have so many. Which one do I talk about? And but I love that candidness because we all look at that. And I don't want to say the right people, but when you look at failure as a way of like a rite of passage, like it's going to happen. And I get to choose to where that's going. So I will put all of your links in the show notes. But Sarah, is there something that you're doing right now, or where our audience can find you? Just share with us a few minutes. But like I said, I will have everything in the show notes too for people who might be driving, or I've always liked to look at those to see where people's social handles are.
Yeah. So you can find me on any social media platform. I'm making a point to be more present on social media. The number one platform that I'm usually posting on is Facebook, just so that you guys are aware. My name is Cierra, Cierra. Last name is Lueck. I am the only one in the world. And so I like take a lot of pride in that.
Yeah.
Um, Also, there's always so many things that I'm doing. If you go to my website, sierraluek.com, that's probably going to have the most up to date information. I just created it. I had my business for like 4 years, multi six figures a year, and no website. So we just created that at the end of the last year, but we're going to be really good. We're going to be really good about making sure that we keep it up to date. So that's probably the best place there. And if there was one note that I would love to leave everybody with, just based on what you were saying, Tabatha, it's fail faster.
Yes. I love that. Well, audience, thank you so much for listening. And remember, if you are in the what went wrong, remember, just stay in the game, keep persisting, and you will get to the what went right. Until next time. Bye, guys.